She's shaking, and she still won't let go.
They told us the footage was corrupted, a malfunction.
But everyone who was there remembers the same thing. The blast, the scream, and the way Captain Mara Ellison kept moving when no one else could. What happened in those 12 missing seconds? The seconds the military refuses to talk about. Would follow her all the way to Fort Benning. To the test designed to break her. And to the truth she never meant to reveal. Welcome to Golden Heart Stories. This is the story of a soldier fighting her way back from silence. And the moment the world finally learns why she never let go. The traverse wall stretched across the obstacle course. Its handholds worn smooth by countless soldiers. Mara Ellison reached for the next grip, fingers curling around cold metal as sweat gathered at her temples despite the morning chill. Her left hand found purchase on a textured hold. Then her shoulder betrayed her. The sharp warning shot through her arm like voltage. Her fingers went slack, her left hand sliding off the grip as her body swung toward open air. The ground rushed up at her peripheral vision. Even as she hung suspended, her right arm bearing all her weight. Her boots scraped against the wall face, searching frantically for purchase, rubber soles squeaking against painted concrete as she fought to redistribute her balance. Around the obstacle course, other soldiers had been running drills. The rhythmic thud of boots on dirt. The grunt of effort at the rope climb, the metallic clang of someone hitting the monkey bars. All of it went quiet. Mara felt their attention shift toward her like physical pressure. Dozens of eyes tracking her struggle. She kept her gaze fixed on the wall, on the next handhold. 6 inches to her right. Her right arm trembled with strain. She could feel the muscle beginning to burn, that familiar sensation preceding failure. But her left shoulder hurt worse. A deep ache radiating down through her bicep and into her forearm. She adjusted her grip with her right hand, fingers digging into the hold until her knuckles went pale, and tried to swing her left arm back up. Near the equipment shed, 2 soldiers stood watching. The corporal, a lean man with a sun-weathered face, tilted his head toward his companion without taking his eyes off Mara. "Her file looks wrong," he said quietly. He shifted his weight. "I pulled her jacket last week. The Kandahar mission report has redactions all through the after-action summary. Something is being hidden." The sergeant shot him an irritated look, her jaw tightening. "Keep your voice down, Hayes," she said sharply. "That is not your concern, and it is definitely not barracks gossip material." "I am just saying what everyone else is thinking," the corporal continued. "Something does not add up here. Perfect record for 8 years, then suddenly she is back stateside. With a busted shoulder and gaps in her file? You do not find that suspicious?" The sergeant stepped closer, her eyes flashing with anger. "What everyone else is thinking, Corporal, is that she dragged 2 wounded soldiers out of a hot zone while taking enemy fire. She kept them alive until the medevac arrived. You want to question that? You want to stand here and spread rumors about a soldier who saved lives? I am not spreading rumors, Sergeant. I am asking legitimate questions. Then ask them through proper channels. Instead of gossiping like a damn civilian," the sergeant snapped. "Now shut your mouth and watch how a real soldier handles adversity." Hayes fell silent, though his gaze remained fixed on the woman clinging to the traverse wall. Mara forced her left hand back toward the wall. Her fingers felt weak, the tremor visible now. She wrapped them around the next hold anyway, refusing to acknowledge the shake. The metal bit into her palm as she squeezed harder than necessary. Her shoulder screamed in protest, but she pulled herself forward 6 inches. Then another 6 inches. The final hold waited just beyond her reach. A blue-painted grip marking the end. Her left hand shook as she reached for it. She clenched her teeth and pulled harder with her right arm, using momentum to carry her forward. Her fingertips brushed the blue hold, slipped, caught. She locked her grip and hung there, both arms extended, her body forming a taut line against the wall. 20 feet away, Colonel Gallagher stood with his arms folded, his uniform crisp despite the early hour. He had positioned himself near the equipment building, where he could observe the entire course without seeming to focus on any one soldier. But his eyes tracked Mara Ellison with steady attention, taking in every detail of her movement. Every sign of pain she tried to hide. His face remained carefully neutral, the controlled expression of years in command. But something shifted in his eyes as he watched her complete the traverse. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He made no move to approach, offered no encouragement, gave no sign of judgment. He simply watched, his gaze intent and assessing. As Mara finally dropped from the wall and landed in the dirt below, with her left arm hanging stiffly at her side. 3 days before the traverse wall, Mara stood at attention in Colonel Gallagher's office while afternoon light slanted through Venetian blinds, casting bars of shadow across the floor. The office smelled of old coffee and printer toner. Gallagher sat behind his desk with her personnel file open, one hand resting on the folder, while the other held a tablet displaying her Kandahar mission footage. He had been scrolling through the file for 2 minutes without speaking, his face unreadable. The silence stretched taut between them like a wire pulled to breaking. Mara kept her gaze fixed on the wall behind his head, hands clasped behind her back in parade rest. Her left shoulder ached from the morning's training, a dull throb pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She could feel sweat cooling on her spine beneath her uniform. The weight of standing motionless pressed down on her injured shoulder, but she refused to shift her stance. Gallagher's silence pressed against her like a physical weight, deliberate and calculated. Finally, he set the tablet down and looked up at her. His eyes were hard, assessing. He tapped the screen with one blunt finger. "There is a 12-second gap in your helmet camera footage from the Kandahar extraction," he said, his voice flat. 12 seconds missing right in the middle of the second explosion sequence. The file shows a clean redaction, not corruption. Someone edited this deliberately. He paused, letting the accusation hang between them. Mara felt her jaw tighten, muscles tensing along her neck. She kept her expression neutral despite the anger beginning to kindle in her chest. Gallagher leaned forward, hands flat on the desk. "I need you to tell me whether you were the one who edited it, Captain Ellison." The words landed like a physical blow. Mara shifted her weight, her shoulder protesting with a sharp spike of pain. She met his gaze directly. "I did not edit anything, sir," she said, voice level and measured. "The file was submitted exactly as I received it from the intelligence officer at Bagram. I have never had access to edit classified footage." Gallagher leaned back, the leather creaking. He picked up a printed document from her file and scanned it, his expression darkening. When he looked back at her, his jaw was set, eyes colder. He demanded an explanation for the PT modification request she had submitted 2 weeks after returning stateside, his tone sharpening. The request asked for exemptions from upper body exercises, reduced load requirements. He set the paper down and folded his hands, stating flatly that such modifications only came from injuries severe enough to permanently limit combat effectiveness. The implication was clear. He believed the missing 12 seconds contained evidence of failure or misconduct. He believed she was hiding something that would disqualify her from command. He believed she had redacted the footage herself to protect her career. Mara felt heat rising in her face, felt her fingers tightening behind her back until her nails dug into her palms. She took a slow breath through her nose, forcing down the surge of anger. When she spoke again, her voice was tight but controlled. "The injury is documented in my medical file, sir. The PT modification request is standard protocol. There is nothing being hidden." Gallagher studied her for a long moment, his expression giving nothing away. Outside, she could hear soldiers running cadence, their voices rhythmic and steady. Inside the office, the air felt too thick, weighted with suspicion and unspoken accusations. "You will take the full PT test this week," Gallagher said finally, his voice taking on the hard edge of command. "No modifications, no exemptions. If you pass, we discuss deployment. If you fail, you accept reassignment away from combat roles." He closed her file with a decisive snap that echoed in the small office. "I will not deploy a soldier I cannot trust. You have until Friday." Dismissed. Mara stood there for one more second, her jaw working as she fought down the urge to argue. Then she snapped to attention, rendered a sharp salute that sent pain shooting through her shoulder like electricity, and turned on her heel to leave. Behind her, she heard Gallagher return to his tablet, the soft sound of him scrolling through her redacted footage. Following her out the door and down the hallway like an accusation she could not escape. The sun had not yet cleared the horizon when soldiers began gathering at the PT field, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Dawn painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. Small groups formed near the equipment shed, voices kept low but carrying in the stillness. Word had spread that Captain Ellison would take her PT test today, and curiosity had drawn them out like spectators to an execution. 2 privates stood near the pull-up bars, their uniforms still bearing storage creases. The younger one shifted his weight, glancing toward the barracks. "I heard the redaction covers the part where she froze under fire," he said quietly, his words creating small clouds in the cold air. "That is why she came back with the injury. She hesitated and someone else paid for it." The other private shook his head, his expression troubled. "That does not match what Sergeant Rivas said. He told me she saved his life in Kandahar. Pulled him out of a kill zone with one arm already bleeding." "You calling him a liar?" "I am not calling anyone a liar. I am just saying there are questions." "Then why redact the footage? Why hide it if she is a hero? Something does not add up here. Maybe it shows classified equipment or operations. Could be a dozen reasons that have nothing to do with her performance. Hell, half our missions have redacted sections. Or maybe it shows exactly what they do not want anyone to see." A captain cracking under pressure. That would explain why Gallagher is watching her so closely. Why she got pulled back stateside instead of staying with her unit. "You are speculating based on nothing. That is dangerous talk, especially when it concerns an officer. I am just asking the same questions everyone else is thinking. Look around. Why do you think half the company showed up to watch?" Neither had a definitive answer. They fell silent as more personnel arrived. The whispers continued, spreading through the crowd. Mara's name passed between lips in half-formed questions and speculation. The missing 12 seconds had become a void that imaginations rushed to fill. Mara arrived 10 minutes before formation, moving through the gate with her eyes forward and her jaw set. She wore standard PT gear, her left arm hanging differently than her right, the shoulder held with unconscious protection. She caught fragments of conversation, words like redaction and injury, drifting to her ears before being cut off by sudden silence. She did not turn to look. She walked to the formation area and took her place in line, standing at attention while the whispers resumed. The minutes crawled past. More soldiers arrived. Mara kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, but she could feel their eyes, the weight of their judgment pressing against her back. Her left shoulder ached in the cold, promising worse pain once the test began. She regulated her breathing, keeping it steady. Gallagher emerged from the command building exactly at 0530. He walked toward the formation, boots crunching on gravel. He moved down the line of soldiers scheduled for testing, scanning each face. His eyes lingered on a corporal who had failed his last test, moved on to a specialist returning from injury, continued down the row. When he reached Mara, he paused. The pause lasted only 2 seconds, maybe 3, but in that brief moment the entire field seemed to hold its breath. Gallagher's eyes met hers, and she saw something flicker in his expression, too quick to identify. Doubt, perhaps. Or calculation. Then he moved on, continuing down the line as if she were no different from any other soldier being tested. But everyone had seen the pause. Everyone had registered that moment of special attention. Near the medical tent, a combat medic caught the eye of a sergeant and made a subtle gesture toward Mara, tapping his own left shoulder twice. The sergeant nodded once. The medic would watch Ellison during the test, monitor that shoulder for signs of failure. The sergeant shifted position to get a better angle on the pull-up bars. Tension spread through the gathered soldiers like electricity. Several glanced between Mara standing rigid in formation and Gallagher now conferring with the test administrator. Others watched the medic preparing his kit, reading the preparation as expectation of injury. The whispers started again, quieter now but more urgent. Mara felt it all, the scrutiny and suspicion, the doubt hanging over her like a sentence waiting to be carried out. She kept her breathing steady and her posture correct, but inside her chest her heart hammered against her ribs. The test had not yet begun, but the real trial was already underway. The push-ups came first. Mara dropped into position when the test administrator called start. Her hands planted shoulder-width apart, body forming a straight line. She began descending, lowering with controlled precision, then driving back up. The first 10 repetitions felt almost normal, her right arm carrying most of the load while her left shoulder protested. She kept her breathing regulated. By the 20th rep, the sting in her left shoulder had sharpened, a burning sensation radiating down her arm. She gritted her teeth and continued, form remaining solid. The watching soldiers had gone quiet. Mara completed the push-up portion and transitioned to sit-ups, her core engaging as she curled upward again and again. The sit-ups passed in a blur. Her shoulder ached less in this position, giving brief respite, but fatigue settled into her muscles. When the administrator called time, Mara stood and rolled her shoulders. Her left shoulder responded with a spike of resistance. The pull-up bar stood 8 feet off the ground. Mara approached, aware of every eye tracking her, aware of Gallagher 20 yards away with his clipboard. She reached up and gripped the bar, her right hand wrapping firmly while her left hand trembled. She took a breath, lifted her feet, and pulled. The first 3 pull-ups felt manageable. But on the 4th rep, halfway up, her left hand began to shake noticeably. The tremor ran through her fingers, making her grip uncertain. She compensated by pulling harder with her right arm, dragging herself up. Soldiers began gathering closer, forming a semicircle. Some stood with arms crossed, eyes intent. Others leaned toward neighbors, speaking in low voices. The crowd grew as she executed her 5th and 6th repetitions, each slower than the last. A corporal near the front muttered to the private beside him, "Watch the left arm. She is barely holding on. That shoulder is completely compromised. Think she will make it to 10? The private whispered back, his eyes fixed on Mara's trembling grip. "Not a chance. Look at that shake. She is going to drop any second now. I give her maybe one more representative before she quits." Another voice from the crowd added, "This is what happens when you come back too soon from injury. Should have taken the desk assignment and saved everyone the trouble. Maybe the missing footage shows her getting hit. Could explain why she cannot grip properly. Or why she keeps favoring that side. Or maybe it shows her freezing up under fire. Either way, she is not fit for deployment. We are supposed to trust our lives to someone who can barely complete 10 pull-ups. Look at Gallagher watching her. He knows something we do not. That is why he demanded this full test. The redaction probably covers negligence or worse. Could be anything in those missing 12 seconds. Mara heard the words as fragments. She pulled herself up for the 7th rep, her left hand visibly trembling, her shoulder screaming. She cleared the bar, lowered herself, and immediately began the 8th pull. The 8th representative took twice as long. Her ascent slowed halfway up, her body seeming suspended as her muscles fought gravity and injury. Her face contorted with effort, veins standing out along her neck. She pulled harder, her right arm bearing most of the load, her left arm shaking so badly the bar seemed to vibrate. Her chin inched upward, agonizingly slow, then she was over. The 9th representative broke her rhythm entirely. Mara hung from the bar for 3 seconds before attempting to pull, her left hand readjusting its grip twice. The whispers surged back. She is not going to finish. Her form is falling apart. Mara blocked out the voices and pulled. Her body rose inch by painful inch, her left shoulder feeling like it might tear apart. Halfway up, her progress stalled. She hung there, suspended, trembling. She closed her eyes, gritted her teeth, and pulled with everything left. Her chin cleared the bar by a fraction, and she lowered herself, her left arm hanging stiffer. The 10th representative required every remaining ounce of will. She pulled upward with her right arm doing most of the work, her left hand barely maintaining its grip. She cleared the bar one last time, held the position, then released and dropped to the ground. She landed hard, her left arm hanging stiffly at her side, the shoulder locked in protective tension. She straightened slowly, forcing her posture back to attention. Around her, the crowd remained silent, some faces showing grudging respect, others displaying the same doubt. 20 yards away, Gallagher watched without expression. He made another mark on his clipboard, then looked up to meet Mara's eyes for one brief second before turning to the next soldier in line. The rope hung 20 feet above the ground, thick manila fiber worn smooth. Mara approached with her right hand reaching forward, her left arm held closer. The crowd had thinned after the pull-ups, but enough remained to watch. She wrapped her right hand around the rope, then positioned her left hand higher with a lighter grip. She jumped and wrapped her legs around the rope, boots crossing. Then she began climbing, pulling upward with her right arm doing most of the work. The technique was awkward but functional. She rose 3 feet, then another 3, her right bicep burning. Her left hand slid up ahead, maintaining minimal contact. Sweat gathered at her temples. At 10 feet up, her rhythm had settled into steady pattern. Her breathing came harder, each exhale carrying a soft grunt. The rope swayed with her movements. She kept her eyes on the bell at the top. Then the dust hit her. Not real dust, but the memory. The acrid taste of Afghan sand, the sound of helicopter blades cutting through smoke. The image flashed across her vision, a fallen soldier in desert camouflage lying motionless, his hand reaching toward something she could not see. The present fractured, and for a heartbeat she was back in Kandahar with the explosion echoing in her shoulder screaming as she dragged Revis uphill. Her concentration shattered. Her left foot slipped from its locked position, her full weight dropping onto her right arm. Pain shot through her left shoulder like lightning. She gasped, her grip loosening as her body swung sideways, the rope burning her palms as she slid down several inches before her hands clamped tight. "Hold on," a voice shouted from below. "You got this, Captain. Lock your legs back up." The words cut through the flashback. Mara blinked hard, forcing herself back to the present. "Come on, Ellison," another soldier yelled. "Push through it. You are halfway there. Do not let go now." A sergeant near the base called up. "Captain, you need to stabilize and keep climbing. Do not stay suspended. Move up or come down, but make a decision." "She is going to fall," someone muttered, barely audible but cutting. "No, she is not," another voice countered sharply. "Look at her grip. She has got it solid." "That flashback could have killed her," a corporal said quietly. "If she loses focus like that in combat, people die. Or maybe it shows her saving lives while half dead herself," the other soldier replied. Mara swung her left leg back up, fighting against gravity and pain. Her boot found the rope, wrapped around it, locked with her right leg. She took a shuddering breath and continued climbing. "That is it," a corporal shouted. "Keep moving, ma'am. You are almost there. Just a few more feet. Do not give up now." "Slow and steady," the sergeant added. "Focus on form, not speed. You have got plenty of time left on the clock. Breathe through it." "Think she will actually finish this?" a private whispered to his companion. "She already finished the hardest part." That recovery from the slip was impressive. Most people would have fallen. The encouragement surprised her, coming from the same crowd that had whispered doubts during the pull-ups. She did not look down. She focused on the rope, on the next pull. Her right arm felt like it might give out. Her left shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. 15 feet, 18 feet. The final meters stretched above her, but she climbed them, her jaw clenched tight, her breathing ragged. The bell came within reach. She released the rope with her right hand and struck the bell with her knuckles. The clear chime rang out across the PT field. Mara hung there for a moment, her legs still locked around the rope, her chest heaving. Sweat dripped from her chin. Then she began to descend, lowering herself hand over hand, her right arm doing most of the work. At 10 feet up, another surge of pain shot through her shoulder, sharper than before. She gasped, her left hand briefly losing its guiding position. She steadied herself, breathing through the pain, forcing her descent to stay controlled. 5 feet from the ground, then 3, then she released the rope and dropped the final distance, landing with knees bent. Her left arm hung at her side, the shoulder locked in protective rigidity. She stood slowly, straightening despite her body wanting to curl around the injury. Around her, several soldiers nodded with what looked like respect, while others maintained skeptical expressions. Gallagher stood in the same position, his clipboard against his chest, his face giving nothing away. Mara walked toward the next obstacle, each step deliberate, her shoulders screaming with every movement but her posture refusing to acknowledge the pain. The 8-foot wall stood at the far end of the obstacle course, a vertical barrier of weathered plywood. Mara approached from 30 yards out, her breathing ragged from the rope climb, her left shoulder throbbing. She knew the technique, had cleared it hundreds of times in training, but those climbs had been with 2 functioning arms. Now she would rely on speed and momentum. She broke into a sprint, boots pounding dirt. The distance closed rapidly, and she forced herself to run faster despite the fatigue. Her left arm swung awkwardly, unable to pump in rhythm, but she channeled all her energy into her legs. At 5 yards out, she planted her right foot and launched upward, her right hand reaching for the top edge while her boots scrambled against the plywood. Her fingers caught the edge, wrapping around the frame. She pulled with her right arm, hauling her body upward while her boots pushed against the wall. Her left hand came up to join her right on the edge, but the grip was weak, trembling. She got her right elbow over the top, then her chest, her body pivoting. For one suspended moment, she balanced at the apex. Then momentum carried her over and she dropped down the opposite side. The landing came hard. Her boots hit the ground with jarring force. But worse was her shoulder, which took the impact like a sledgehammer blow. The jolt sent white-hot pain exploding through her left side, so intense her vision went gray. She stumbled forward 2 steps, her left arm hanging useless, her right hand reaching across to cradle the injured shoulder. "Did you see that landing?" a soldier muttered from the sideline. He stood with a small group near the water station. "The missing footage probably looks worse than this. Whatever happened in Kandahar destroyed that shoulder completely. She should not even be attempting combat certification." The words landed like physical blows. Mara heard them clearly despite the rushing in her ears. She felt her jaw clench, felt anger mixing with pain. A sergeant standing near the group turned sharply toward the soldier, his face hardening. He took 2 steps toward the man, closing the distance. "That is enough, Private," the sergeant said, his voice low but carrying an edge that could cut steel. "You will keep your speculation to yourself, or you will find yourself running this course again under my personal supervision. Am I understood?" The private's face flushed red, his eyes dropping. "Yes, Sergeant. I said, am I understood?" the sergeant repeated, his voice rising to a bark. "Yes, Sergeant," the private responded, louder this time, straightening to attention. The sergeant held his gaze for 3 seconds, then turned away dismissively. The group dispersed quickly. Mara had watched with peripheral awareness, her main focus dedicated to regaining control. She straightened slowly, fighting against every instinct to curl around the injury. Her spine lengthened vertebra by vertebra until she stood at full height, chin lifting despite her left arm hanging limply. The pain continued its assault, but she refused to acknowledge it. A medic approached from the medical tent, aid bag slung over one shoulder, concern written across his face. "Captain Ellison," he began, already reaching for her arm. "I need to examine that shoulder. The way you landed suggests possible further injury to the rotator cuff or surrounding tissue. We should get imaging and—" "I am fine," Mara interrupted, stepping back. Her voice came out harder than intended, edged with pain and determination. "I am continuing the test." The medic hesitated. She was an officer, and unless visibly incapacitated, he could not force treatment. But his eyes tracked to her left arm, to the way it hung differently. "Ma'am, if that shoulder is compromised, continuing could result in permanent damage. I have seen rotator cuff tears that ended careers. Let me at least do a quick assessment before you." "I said I am fine, Corporal," Mara repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I appreciate your concern, but I will complete this test. Now step aside." She turned away before he could respond, her movements stiff but deliberate as she walked toward the next obstacle. Each step sent fresh jolts through her shoulder, but she kept her pace steady, kept her posture straight. 30 yards away, Colonel Gallagher stood with his clipboard against his chest. His eyes following Mara across the field with an expression that revealed nothing. His face remained carved in stone, professionally neutral, but his gaze never wavered from her figure as she approached the next challenge. He made no move to intervene, offered no encouragement or criticism, simply watched with the patient attention of a man gathering data. The ice pack pressed against Mara's shoulder felt like frozen knives against inflamed tissue. But she held it in place, her right hand clamping it tight while her left arm rested limply. She sat alone in the equipment shed, hidden by stacked training mats. The PT test had ended 40 minutes ago, and most soldiers had dispersed, leaving the field quiet. She closed her eyes and focused on the numbing cold seeping into her damaged shoulder. 200 yards away, Colonel Gallagher sat at his desk with Mara's Kandahar file open on the screen. He had been staring at the same 12-second gap in the mission footage for 20 minutes, replaying the corrupted segment. The video showed Mara moving through the compound under fire, then cut to black at the moment of the second explosion. When the feed returned, she was already dragging Sergeant Rivas uphill with one arm, her shoulder visibly damaged, her uniform dark with blood. The gap told him nothing. He picked up his office phone and dialed Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell, who had overseen the Kandahar operation. The phone rang 3 times before Mitchell answered, his voice exhausted. Gallagher dispensed with pleasantries. "Colonel Mitchell, this is Gallagher at Benning. I need you to tell me directly why 12 seconds are redacted from Captain Ellison's Kandahar mission file. I need the real reason, not the sanitized version." There was a pause, the silence stretching before Mitchell exhaled slowly. "It is not a redaction in the traditional sense," Mitchell said carefully. "The camera experienced a complete malfunction during the second explosion. The blast hit close enough to fry the electronics for approximately 12 seconds before the system auto-rebooted." Gallagher leaned forward, gripping the edge of his desk. "And what happened during those 12 seconds? According to every other soldier who witnessed it, Captain Ellison used her own body to shield Sergeant Rivas from the blast. She was already moving toward him when the explosion hit. She covered him completely, took shrapnel in her shoulder and back, and kept giving orders to the medevac crew even while she was bleeding out. The camera malfunction occurred at the exact moment she made contact with Rivas. Which means the footage that would have shown her most heroic action is the footage that got destroyed." Gallagher felt something shift in his chest, a realignment of assumptions. He thanked Mitchell curtly and ended the call, then turned back to the file. He navigated to the audio track, isolating the corrupted segment and increasing the gain to maximum. The playback began with static, but underneath he could make out fragments of sound. Gunfire crackled through the speakers, rapid bursts suggesting close-quarters combat. The deep thrum of helicopter rotor blades cut through intermittently. Then, barely audible beneath layers of distortion, he heard Mara's voice shouting orders with clarity that only came from pure adrenaline and training. "Get down. Second charge incoming. Rivas, stay flat." The words were fragmentary, broken by static, but the intent was unmistakable. She had known the second explosion was coming. She had positioned herself deliberately, had made a conscious choice to shield her wounded sergeant despite knowing what the blast would do to her. Gallagher replayed the audio 3 more times, listening to those fragmented commands. Each playback added another piece to the picture, another layer of understanding about what kind of soldier Mara Ellison was beneath the injury and struggle. He sat back and stared at the frozen frame, at Mara's figure moving with purpose toward a fallen comrade. The missing footage did not hide a failure. It hid the exact opposite, a moment of selfless courage that had cost her full function of her shoulder and nearly cost her life. The redacted 12 seconds were not evidence of weakness or misconduct. They were simply the cruel accident of a camera dying at precisely the wrong moment. He closed the file and picked up the PT test results from that morning, scanning through the scores with new understanding. She had passed every event, met every standard despite an injury that would have justified medical exemption. She had done it through adaptation and determination and sheer refusal to quit, exactly the qualities that had led her to cover Rivas with her own body. Gallagher set down the test results and reached for the promotion recommendation form he had prepared earlier that week, left blank pending today's evaluation. He picked up his pen and began to write, his handwriting firm and decisive as he filled in the sections that would move Mara Ellison forward in her career. The summons came an hour after Mara had removed the ice pack from her shoulder. A specialist found her in the equipment shed. Colonel Gallagher wanted to see her immediately. Mara stood slowly, her left arm still stiff, and followed the specialist across the field. Each step sent small jolts through her shoulder, but she kept her pace steady. Gallagher's office door stood open. He sat behind his desk with her file displayed on screen, but his attention shifted to her the moment she appeared. He gestured for her to enter and close the door. She came to attention in front of his desk, waiting. "At ease, Captain," Gallagher said, his voice carrying none of the sharp edge from their last meeting. "Sit down." Mara lowered herself into the chair, her movements controlled. She kept her back straight, hands resting on her thighs. Gallagher studied her for a moment, then leaned forward. "I need you to tell me what happened after the first explosion in Kandahar," he said. Your version of events, starting from when you realized Sergeant Rivas was down. Mara felt her throat tighten, the memories pressing against the walls she had built. She took a breath and began speaking, her voice steady. She described dragging Rivas uphill with one functioning arm while enemy fire continued around them. The weight of his body multiplying with every meter over the scorched Afghan hillside. Her left arm had already been compromised from the first blast, the shoulder joint screaming with every movement. But she had hooked her right arm under his tactical vest and pulled. Her legs drove against unstable ground while bullets kicked up dirt on either side. The medevac helicopter had been incoming, its rotors creating deafening thunder that mixed with gunfire. She had focused on nothing but forward movement, on getting Rivas to the landing zone. I saw the secondary charge detonate, she said, her jaw tightening. I threw myself over Rivas without thinking. The blast lifted us both. I felt shrapnel strike my shoulder, multiple impacts through my body armor at the joint. I maintained position over him even as the blast threw us sideways. Her voice remained controlled as she recounted how she had shielded him during that second blast. How the explosion had been a wall of force and heat, how the pain had arrived as bright points of agony that cut through the adrenaline flooding her system. Her body had become the barrier between him and the worst of the secondary explosion. When she finished speaking, the office fell silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning. Mara kept her eyes fixed on Gallagher, waiting for his response, her hands gripped tight against her thighs. Gallagher reached across his desk and turned his monitor so Mara could see the screen. The document displayed was a medical report with multiple sections highlighted in yellow. He tapped the screen. This is the after-action medical assessment from the flight crew that extracted you and Rivas, he said quietly. It credits your actions with saving not only Sergeant Rivas but also the 2 flight medics. Who would have been exposed to the secondary blast if you had not moved Rivas away from the initial explosion site? Mara leaned forward, her eyes scanning the highlighted sections. The words blurred slightly as she read, fatigue and pain combining to create pressure behind her eyes. The report detailed shrapnel trajectory analysis, estimated casualties if the medevac had been in its original position. Medical interventions that had kept both her and Rivas alive. Everything documented, everything explained except for the 12 seconds the camera had failed to capture. She sat back, her left shoulder throbbing. She understood now why the footage had failed exactly at the peak of the chaos. The camera electronics succumbing to the electromagnetic pulse at the precise instant when her body had made contact with Rivas. The missing seconds were not conspiracy or cover-up. They were simply the fragility of technology and the cruel randomness of which moments got preserved and which disappeared. You passed your PT test today, Captain, Gallagher said, pulling her attention back to the present. You met every standard despite an injury that would justify permanent modification. That tells me everything I need to know about your capability and your character. He slid a document across the desk toward her, the promotion recommendation form filled out in his precise handwriting, every section completed with detail that went far beyond the minimum required. Gallagher set the promotion recommendation form back down and leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. He was silent for a moment, studying her with intensity that felt almost clinical. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a different quality, something more personal, less filtered through military protocol. I need to explain something to you, Captain, he began, his hands folding on the desk. Something about why I pushed you so hard, why I questioned your ability to return to active duty despite what your file showed. Mara remained still, her back straight, her injured shoulder throbbing with steady rhythm. She kept her eyes on Gallagher, waiting. He explained that he had taken shrapnel in his right leg during his second deployment to Iraq. An IED strike that required 3 surgeries and 8 months of physical therapy. When he came back to active duty, he had thought he was ready, thought he had adapted and compensated despite permanent damage. His jaw tightened as he recounted what happened 6 months later. He had led a patrol into an ambush in Fallujah. His leg gave out during the firefight, locked up when he tried to sprint to cover. One of his soldiers had to drag him out while taking fire. 2 men were wounded covering his extraction. He had convinced himself that willpower could overcome physical limitation, and that arrogance nearly got people killed. Mara felt something shift in her understanding of the man. Sitting across from her, a realignment of perspective that recontextualized every interaction since she arrived at Fort Benning. The suspicion, the harsh testing, the demand for proof. It had not been about her specifically. It had been about his own failure. I have spent the last 10 years distrusting any soldier who returns from injury and claims readiness for combat deployment. Gallagher said, his voice carrying weight of admission. I convinced myself I was protecting the unit, maintaining standards. But what I was really doing was projecting my own failure onto every wounded soldier I encountered. The office felt smaller, the air heavier. Mara could hear the quiet tick of the wall clock, distant sounds from the hallway outside. Gallagher acknowledged that her test performance that morning had demonstrated something he failed to recognize immediately. She had shown adaptation, not denial. She had modified her technique to work within her limitations rather than pretending they did not exist. She had demonstrated sound judgment about when to compensate. Most importantly, she had shown absolute refusal to quit. Those are the qualities that matter in combat leadership, he said, leaning forward again. Not physical perfection, not the absence of injury. The ability to adapt, to assess, to persist despite obstacles. You have those qualities, Captain Ellison. Your actions in Kandahar proved it, and your performance today confirmed it. Mara felt her throat tighten with emotion she had been holding back for weeks, the validation landing with unexpected force. She maintained her composure, kept her face neutral, but something shifted inside her chest, a release of tension she had been carrying like armor. You will deploy with the unit as originally planned, Gallagher said, his voice firm. No modifications to your orders. No reassignment to non-combat roles. He reached across the desk and slid the promotion recommendation form toward Mara. The document detailed her leadership during Kandahar, her demonstrated resilience, her successful completion of physical testing despite injury, and his recommendation for promotion to major ahead of the standard timeline. Mara looked down at the form, her eyes scanning the words. Her hands remained in her lap, not quite steady enough to reach for the document without revealing the depth of what she was feeling. I need your signature acknowledging receipt and acceptance, Gallagher said quietly, extending a pen. Mara took the pen with her right hand. She leaned forward and signed the form with careful precision, her signature steady. When she set the pen down and looked back up at Gallagher, she found him watching her with something that might have been respect. Thank you, sir, she said, her voice quiet but clear. She was overwhelmed, the emotion pressing against the careful control she maintained, but she was steady. She had passed the test, earned the deployment, proven herself not despite her injury but through how she had learned to work with it. The missing 12 seconds in Kandahar no longer mattered. What mattered was what came next, and she was ready for it. The duffel bag lay open on Mara's bunk, half filled with equipment. She moved through packing with methodical precision, her right hand doing most of the work while her left arm operated with reduced range but increasing functionality. Each item found its place: uniforms rolled tight, boots wrapped in plastic, personal items tucked into pouches. The room smelled of canvas and boot polish. A knock interrupted her. Mara turned to find Sergeant Rivas in the doorway, his posture uncertain, hands clasped in front of him. He wore his dress uniform, crisp and clean, a stark contrast to the last time she had seen him covered in blood and dust. "Captain," he said, "I hope I am not interrupting. I wanted to speak with you before you deploy." Mara gestured for him to enter. Rivas stepped in but remained near the door, his weight shifting in a way that spoke of discomfort with what he needed to express. "I never properly thanked you for what you did in Kandahar," he said, the words stiff and rehearsed. "The doctors told me you shielded me during the second explosion. That you took shrapnel meant for me. That you kept me alive when I should have bled out on that hillside." His voice caught slightly, emotion breaking through. He cleared his throat, jaw tightening. "I do not remember most of it," he continued, his eyes meeting hers. "But I remember waking up in the medical facility and being told what you did. I wanted you to know that it matters. That I know what it cost you." Mara felt something shift in her chest at his words. She had carried the burden of Kandahar alone for months. Having Revis stand in front of her now, alive because of choices she had made in those 12 missing seconds, gave concrete form to validation that had existed only in reports. "You do not need to thank me, Sergeant," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I did what any soldier would do for their team. What you would have done for me if our positions had been reversed." "Maybe so, ma'am," Revis replied, his voice softer now. "But you still did it. You still made that choice when it mattered most. That deserves acknowledgement, whether you think you need it or not." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken understanding filling the space. Then Revis nodded once, a sharp military gesture. "Good luck on your deployment, ma'am," he said, stepping back toward the door. "And thank you, whether you want to hear it or not." He left before she could respond, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Mara returned to her packing, but her hands moved slower now, her mind occupied with the encounter. An hour later, she walked across the base toward the assembly point with her duffel bag over her right shoulder and deployment pack secured to her back. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parade ground. Soldiers moved in purposeful streams toward staging areas. Several caught her eye as she passed, offering nods of respect that carried none of the suspicion from weeks earlier. Mara's left hand moved unconsciously to touch the scar beneath her uniform, her fingers finding the raised tissue through the fabric. The injury had become part of her landscape, a reminder of when she had chosen to shield Revis. The scar aligned now with the truth restored through Gallagher's investigation, through the acknowledgement that the missing 12 seconds represented not failure but the opposite. Transport planes rumbled overhead in formation, their engines creating deep thunder. She watched them pass, massive shapes cutting through the afternoon sky, knowing that soon she would board one and leave Fort Benning behind. The thought carried no fear, no uncertainty. She had proven herself through adaptation and persistence. The assembly point came into view ahead, organized chaos of soldiers forming up with gear. Mara approached with steady steps, her posture straight despite the weight, her left arm hanging with slight stiffness but functional. She was ready to lead, ready to deploy, ready to define herself not by the injury or missing footage, but by the resilience that had carried her through recovery. She stepped forward into the formation, taking her place among the soldiers who would deploy under her command, and felt the last remnants of doubt fall away. The road ahead stretched into uncertainty, into danger and challenge, but she was ready for it. She had always been ready. The only question had been whether others would recognize that truth, and now they did. Some journeys aren't about medals or perfect bodies. They're about standing back up when life tries to keep you down. Mara carried her scars into the future with courage. And sometimes that's all any of us can do. If her strength reminded you of your own, tap the like button and share this story with someone who might need a little hope today. And please tell us in the comments, what part of Mara's journey stayed with you the most? Your thoughts mean more than you know. Thank you for watching. This has been Golden Heart Stories.